So, uh, hi, I'm Resident of Collinwood, Jules Sains, and finally, we are here. And I'm joined by Patrick McCray, author of the Dark Shadows Daybook. How are you, man?
I am. I'm fine as one.
That's good.
That Huckleberry, Mrs. Robinson. Yeah, I'm doing great.
That's great, man. So, we're here to discuss 1897, the 1897 arc. Now, with Dark Shadows, it takes an interesting time to get here because they introduced a lot of characters sort of to get here. They introduced not just Quentin, but they introduced Chris Jennings,
Magda,
who's,
Magda shows up at a sing.
yep, Magda shows up at a seance. What did you think of that seance where it's Professor Stokes, Chris Jennings, I think Carolyn's there, and Chris sort of not sort of, he does interrupt this. And I love how Stokes just is like in his face, like, I'm curious as to why you did that, Mr. Jennings.
Well, I think, as I recall, it's because Chris is from the real world.
Right.
Chris is one of the most real world guys. For a werewolf, he's one of the most grounded real world people to enter the show and just kind of say, what is this? What are you people doing up here in Maine? No wonder my brother went goofy. So, I mean, it was a fun seance. And that when Dark Shadows introduces someone, new people don't enter into Dark Shadows very often. And there's a good chance that when they're introduced in a seance or something like that, they're going to be important. I mean, I fully expected Philippe Cordier to show up and be a major character at a point. And so there was just something about the mention of Magda that really let me know something major's coming.
Magda is a gypsy, and I'm so curious to what did you think of the gypsies in general? Magda, Johnny Romano, Jenny. What did you think of them?
Well, I don't really know any members of the Roma community. So, to what extent they are a cruel ethnic cliche, I don't know. I know that Grayson Hall apparently had some Romani ancestry, so whether or not they are a cruel stereotype, I can't say,
Right.
but I think they exist in a lot of ways to be reflectors for the Collinses and their attitudes towards family and honor and debt. Because on the surface, we inherit these gypsies and they seem to be charming scumbags.
Right.
And but not completely awful, because as much as in the very first scene, as much as Magda is ragging on Xandor about saying, I never knew if I was going to live when you would throw your knives at me, and so on, at the same time, there is clear affection between the two of them. And they're kind of like Morticia and Gomez in that it's suddenly a genuinely affectionate couple that somehow isn't sappy. And I feel like I'm basically hanging out with Sam Hall and Grayson in their home. And so as it goes on, occasionally they do make terrible decisions in the name of family, but they are loyal decisions. They are defensive decisions. And for all of, their criminality, in some ways, I think the gypsies exist to show us that this is how good people behave, only on Dark Shadows. I remember when I first did the big rewatch in 2012, I really wanted to have a list of like the qualities that make a great Collins, and like the qualities of a great Starfleet officer or something like that. Well, the first quality of being a great Collins is probably not being a Collins.
Right.
There's very little family honor. Joshua occasionally pretends like there is, And but really they are a bunch of, conniving, backstabbing, duplicitous, you know uh, 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 bad people. and and so when you see the gypsies, you see something else. And the one of the things I'm really fascinated by with Dark Shadows is its focus on the weirdness of white culture, specifically white Anglo-Saxon culture. And on Dark Shadows, you really see them lampooned. And, like the comedy in Dark Shadows comes from seeing this class of people try to pretend there's nothing wrong when there's everything wrong. And the thing that just kind of hangs there in the background is, for God's sake, don't be something other than a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. Barnabas falls for an island girl.
Right, Angela.
The friend of a sleazy Irishman is the one who messes up Liz's life. It's okay to have been a former satanic snake god, as long as you're blonde and blue-eyed, And so then you have Quentin, who also, because basically the story of Quentin and Barnabas is the same story. It's just one drinks a little more. And, what happens, but he runs off with a gypsy, and we see what's going to happen. It's terrible. And what does he get turned into? He gets turned into a hairy creature with weird nocturnal urges, who is inherently family oriented, but doesn't really have a family. In other words, this, the werewolf's kind of this metaphor for what wasps viewed as anyone who wasn't a wasp. And so yeah, that's my short answer for what I thought of the gypsies.
I think there's a lot to the gypsies in Dark Shadows, especially. Have you ever seen the movie The Princess Bride?
Yes, I have.
Okay, and how Dread Pirate Roberts, the next person becomes Dread Pirate Roberts. I have a theory with Johnny Romano here.
Okay, so there are many Johnny Romanos?
Yes.
Okay.
But the only difference is when Johnny Romano is killed, when he dies, air quotes,
yeah,
his spirit goes into a child gypsy, and that is Johnny Romano, whether it's a man or woman.
Okay.
Instead of it just being, it's not quite Dread Pirate Roberts, but it's Dread Pirate Roberts-esque.
Okay.
If that makes any real sense.
Yeah, and keep in mind, Dread Pirate Roberts is just the Phantom.
Right. Yep. And I think there's some sort of this weird power to these gypsies. I mean, they do have the power to turn someone into a werewolf. They did it with Patofe.
Sure.
And they did it with Quentin. And Patofe had power even without the hand. So if they do it to a warlock, do something to a warlock, where a warlock who's as powerful as that fears them, there's something more to these people than just thievery and stuff. And I love the point you're making about class. I agree with you, and here's why. Edward looks down upon the gypsies, but Johnny Romano holds a trial for Magna.
Yeah.
And I've always loved that about 1897.
Beasts of the field, wild birds of the air. Yeah, and he wears a cape too.
Yeah.
And he's got Istvan as an owl. Doesn't Istvan walk off a cliff? I'm just completely not hypnotized at that point.
What did you think of them taking the I Ching wands? Barnabas goes back to 1897 to save everybody, or just save solve the mystery of the werewolf, we'll say.
Yeah. I loved it. I thought it was because let's face it, all this stuff is nonsense anyway. Divination and I Ching wands and
Right.
seeing into the future and this whole Gene Dixon madness, and I love it when people say that's not how the I Ching works. That's inaccurate. It's like, guys, it's all make believe. We had a troll for a while whose name was Karen at Collinsport Historical, who at one point kept saying, well, the way you're talking about vampires, but vampires don't work that way. And Wallace simply said, note, vampires don't exist. So I thought it was really inventive. I thought it was a strange, inventive way to get Barnabas's spirit moving back and forth. And why not? And it also opened up Shocking Asia to Dark Shadows, which then would later show up with Judah Zachary and all of this other stuff. And that opened up the world of mysticism in Dark Shadows. And Dark Shadows is always until they get to, I think, really Judah Zachary, there's always some element of another culture. Josette's French, so God only knows what they're doing over there. They're liking Jerry Lewis movies and who knows what, eating cheese. And so you've got that sort of a cult, but then you've got the island stuff with Martinique and zombies. And then we get Asia and the I Ching. And what's Judah Zachary's head doing over there anyway? I guess it was teaching English, because there are good jobs in that. So he's a teacher. So I think it was, I don't know, what did you think of it?
I like that they use all these cultures. They use, you talk about the I Ching, they use the Asians, they bring that in. Also, Quentin, we've learned, went to, Egypt and stuff with Laura.
You get all the Egyptian weirdness.
Right. So I agree with you. Dark Shadows always had a unique way of, no, it may not have been accurate.
That's such a thing.
Right. But it was fun. It's like, it's something you could sort of look at and be like, they're introducing these cultures that, okay, you may not know of them and they may not be accurate with them, but you could look at that and sort of appreciate what they're trying to do here and include these other cultures.
Here's the very interesting thing, and the thing that Through a Mirror Darkly has a very Star Trek quality to it, because both Dark Shadows and Star Trek had a lot of the same messages. And mainly that it was good to have acted Shakespeare and be from Canada. But beyond that, on one level, all of these other cultures represent some kind of magical threat to the Collinses. But that threat often has a strange dignity, and that threat is often just sort of standing up for itself. And because the Collinses are fearing it, it kind of shows how xenophobic and I don't know if I can say this, chicken shit, the Collins kind of are. And rather than just say, oh, this is from another culture and it's bad, the implication is, no, this is from another culture and it has power.
Yeah.
And maybe by denying all of these world cultures, we have denied ourselves a form of understanding.
Yeah. And here's another thing too. You sort of get that with how they're treating Jenny too, because she's a gypsy. Magda's sister. They don't tell her. They don't tell Magda about the kids. They keep it from Quentin. It's like, holy shit, you people are nuts for doing that.
Well, and Jenny is a double threat, because we have to take into account, we can't ignore the fact that she's fair skinned,
Right.
and has a thick New York accent. And if you look at fair skinned redheads with thick New York accents, there's only one thing that you come away with: Irish.
Yeah.
So I'm convinced that Jenny had some sort of, she's Magda's half sister, and had some sort of profoundly Irish father. And so she really represents two cultures, and she has a name that's from Western Europe. It's not Magda, it's not Zandor, it's Jenny
Yep.
LeBlanc.
I like that when they finally reveal this, when Quentin's son dies, the look on that David Selby gives, his face is just like, how great was, we talked before a little bit about Quentin being sort of like the James Bond, the pimp, but how great was just David Selby as Quentin Collins in general, you think?
It is a miraculous performance. It is the performance that I feel like, without knowing it, Dark Shadows was built to facilitate. He is the Spock of Dark Shadows. Um, and, in that it is this completely unique, indelible performance. And he is able to do so much. And the fact is that 1897 is Quentin's story, and it's the story of transformation. Well, all of Dark Shadows is about transformation, but with Quentin, one of the reasons why the Quentin story kind of ends up being unsatisfying is that, whereas Barnabas's arc and Barnabas's story takes 900 or something episodes to pull off, Quentin's happens in 150.
Yeah.
And we see him change completely. I don't even know if the writers were kind of planning on all of that when they introduced the character, but they struck gold with Selby because he can do so much, including be Count Patofi for about a month on the show.
Yep.
And brilliant. He's absolutely brilliant as that. And that, they brought David Selby on to be handsome and charming. Whereas, Selby himself is kind of wondering if he's going to get fired when he opens his mouth and, kind of talks like this. And, Barnabas. And, but as it turns out, maybe the writers, once they realized what they had with David Selby, wrote that material for him, because you see him age about 30 years in one episode where he finds out that his son is dead and that he had a son. And it's all about this guy growing up.
Yeah. I think that's the biggest. Before Jameson rejects him, before the rejection of Jameson, him finding out his son, he has kids, and his son dies. I agree with you. That look on his face, that whole scene right there, he's growing up. Like, he's went from playboy philanthropist with women to, my God, what have I been doing all this time with my life? And I love it because this character has been a lot of things up until this point. And it's just beautiful.
It's also an interesting tribute to the way that adulthood makes people boring.
Yeah.
Because once Quentin becomes the responsible head of the household, when Edward is suddenly turned into this almost comical step and fetch it in whiteface type character, Selby shows up and he said, wait, what happened? Wait, I'm the responsible one now? But it's happened at the right time.
Yeah.
And you have Edward kind of fallen in love suddenly with this woman who shows up from out of nowhere with a dubious pedigree, which is exactly what Quentin would have done. And you have Judith getting involved in an ill-advised marriage, which is exactly what Quentin would have. Yeah. And then Carl is just Carl. And so it's like he shows up at Collinwood. Everyone else becomes a weirdo, and he's the one who suddenly is saddled with the mantle of adulthood, and he pulls it off. But as he pulls it off, the character becomes increasingly bland by necessity.
Can I ask you a weird question? When I first watched Dark Shadows and watched 1897, and I love John Carlin to death, I do. But when I saw Carl Collins, I'm like, man, I wonder when they're gonna kill this guy off. Were you ever wondering the same thing?
Sure. I mean, it's just there's a ticking clock in the background. There's because after a while, what do you do with a character like this? He pretty much exists to get on people's nerves and eventually get killed. Although, gosh, it really makes me wonder, what would Carl Collins have done with Count Petofi and vice versa? How would these two men have gotten along? And would, I think, like Aristide would just become best friends with Carl, and they'd get bunk beds and get into pillow fights and make BFF bracelets, and it's like he wouldn't be able to get them away from Carl.
The biggest missed opportunity is he never got to pull the pistol prank on Count Petofi. Like,
sure,
right? He pulls it on Barter, but
the joke would have been that there would have been some important character who needed to die, and that Petofi would have switched the guns on him.
Right.
So Carl would suddenly be accused of murder, and that would have given a button for the gag. Yeah, that's how it would have gone.
I love it. What did you think of the fact that once they want when we finally see the hand of Petofi, and Magda steals it. You learn that Magda didn't, she just took it without permission, and they have really no control over this thing. What did you think of it?
I thought it was really wacky. I mean, it's something that it's pure Dark Shadows, in that it is completely obscenely ludicrous, and yet at the same time you have this cognitive dissonance because you take it seriously because all of the other characters take it seriously, and it really does both at the same time. And again, I remember when I was a kid and I was watching the first Dark Shadows episodes in the as Barnabas is being introduced, and you keep hearing these references to Collinwood's history, and you just know it's like a Civil War battlefield, that so much has gone on in this house, and that everything is relying on a larger world, discussing this larger world beyond Dark Shadows, or beyond Collinwood. And the hand of Count Petofi is maybe the weirdest, wildest, most wonderful example that 1897 has gotten so insane that now we have a magical hand to worry about. And I had read Catherine Lee Scott's thing in her scrapbook memories, where they gave the whole plot away. So I knew certain things were coming. That wasn't entirely a surprise, but good God, I had no idea how magical, literally, as in terms of just storytelling magic, it would be.
I love how because by the time I'd watched Dark Shadows, I had seen the Addams Family.
Sure.
And when I saw the hand of Patofe, I didn't. What I love about it is it doesn't make me think of Thing.
Yeah,
It doesn't. It looks so different. This thing looks evil, just from
sure.
the opening of the box. I know it's a fake hand and all that, but it just looks so menacing. And I had not read about the Infinity Gauntlet yet.
Oh, yeah,
And that's when I saw it, that's instantly what this thing reminded me of.
sure.
Is Marvel's The Infinity Gauntlet.
Yeah.
Without the actual glove, it had all this power, and you're thinking, man, whoever that hand belongs to, that person has to have some sort of power of his own. And when you meet Patofe under a fake name, which I love, Mr. Ben Gibbons, I think it is.
Gibbons.
Yes.
Victor, this is not a pseudonym, Van Gibbons.
Right.
Uh, for whom Edward has a very strange man crush.
Right. Right. He does.
Edward is really into English gentlemen in a
Yes.
big way. Gerald Soames, Victor Van Gibbons, and they're all sleazebags. So clearly he has this atrocious taste in friends.
And yet he has a deep-seated hatred for the gypsies. It's like, dude, the people you like are scumbags.
I love him. I think he's my favorite character, actually, from 1897. If we just measure it by the wild grin I get on my face when a character walks on the screen, Edward, easily, I will watch Edward do anything. And then when he becomes a monster hunter, and then he becomes, after he gets his mind switched around and comes back and realizes that, yeah, all this magic is real, he becomes very tender towards his children,
Yep.
which I love also. I think it's just another, you can't write him off. Because, and this is the thing that we also have to countenance, is that we're watching Roger and Liz's grandpa. He's your gramps,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And what was he like as their grandfather? And we're watching little Jameson, their dad, growing up.
Yep.
And, you know, no wonder Roger and Liz don't really know a lot about the haunted stuff in the house. Jameson and Edward made a vow to not tell them about any of it, but simply say, you know, there's a radiation leak or whatever in the West Wing, so stay out of it. And that was enough, you know.
Edward, I love what you're saying. Edward's another character that when he experiences something, he believes it. He doesn't hit Barnabas disappearing and being on the other side of the door. He's suspicious then. And then, like you said, after his mind gets flipped back around finally from being the butler, you're right, he's, with his kids, he's so concerned about them, even more so than what he even was. Not that he wasn't prior, but he's even more. And you're right, he comes this Van Helsing type character, almost, like to a degree, hunting down the vampire and the werewolf.
Yeah.
What did you think of when this story started? It started with, you know, them unwalling the Quentin's room, and we finally learn in the 1897 article, Quentin did leave for France. Well, if Quentin leaves, then who was in the room? And lo and behold, who was in the room was Gregory Trask.
Yeah, I have a whole theory about that. That again earned the ire of this Karen, literally a Karen. Apologies to another Karen who's actually a good friend of Dark Shadows and of the Historical Society, who rails against the misuse of the name Karen. But the other Karen, boy, she really lived up to it. And she hated this theory. So by all means, let us talk about it.
Yes.
My contention, my maybe, is that it was always Gregory Trask's body.
Yeah.
And that Quentin was always alive, which is why, in 1970, when Quentin shows back up, or late 69, when Quentin shows back up, everyone kind of remembers the ghost of Quentin.
Yep.
And yet they acknowledge, oh, this is a different guy. He just looks exactly like him, because they're used to that. And I think that maybe it was Judah Zachary messing around, trying to basically make Quentin appear to be as disreputable as possible, because he knew that this is one of the primary threats he's going to face. And he thought, well, let's get Barnabas back in time where people are more credible about fighting vampires.
Yeah.
So he'll be done away with. It makes so much sense if it was always the body of Gregory Trask.
Right.
And yeah, we can kind of look through our bad eye and go like this when it comes to that and the clothes he's wearing. But yeah, that makes the whole story make a whole lot more sense.
Right. It's one hell of a theory. I mean, because once we see Judith wall him in with the help of Tim Shaw, I do believe,
finally redeeming himself.
Right. And so it's like, oh my God, it was him this whole time. I will say this, because we've sort of talked about the writers not knowing certain things, like not planning out certain things, like a Judah Zachary. Could I see this warlock sort of suckering Barnabas without Barnabas realizing it, because he himself did not know Angelique's true history? Sure. Because every story that we all know, not just Dark Shadows, hell, Halloween, everything is up for interpretation. Any written or written story, movie we watch, show, it's all interpretation. So I could see what you're saying, that it could be Judah,
I mean, he's good at either imitating ghosts or
right.
getting ghosts to do what he wants.
Yeah.
Because I don't think we ever necessarily get evidence that he is not just disguising himself as Gerard.
No.
And Daphne never gives a really clear explanation for who she is or what she is. She's just suddenly at Collinwood, alive in that cranberry colored dress. And they just kind of accept her, and then they bring her on. Does she become the new governess?
They sort of, what they do is they put her in Victoria Winters' clothes. And she's there. She does sort of interact with the kids that are there. And then that's when everything sort of goes to shit. I don't necessarily think she becomes the new governess, but she does wear Vicky's old clothes, if I remember correctly.
Relate to that very much. If the show had continued and they had gotten back to the present, I think that's certainly, because they were replacing Catherine.
Yep.
Who kind of was replacing Alexander Mulkey, and a crime to the fabulous Betsy Durkin, I might add. Yep. And the sublime Carolyn Groves, but that's okay. Things got a lot hipper when Maggie was in charge, because she dressed from Junior Sophisticates, of course. And so I think, just like they were grooming Kathy Cody, I think, to be the next young blonde as Carolyn aged and became increasingly weird and bitter and morose. You can see, Dan Curtis kind of lining up the next ensemble that didn't really happen.
In many ways, he's sort of almost Mark B. Perry, we talked about, is doing the next generation, and sort of Dan Curtis was lining up his next generation in a sense.
Oh, I think, he had a good blueprint of soap operas by necessity having to be dynastic, and that you always want an ensemble, at least one part of the ensemble to be of a certain age. And yeah, I think that's clear that, fortunately he had Hennessy, whose voice had gotten, deeper than James Earl Jones's over parallel time. And that's always the eerie part, is to hear that voice coming out of David Hennessy's body. So sure, yeah, he's getting the next group ready, and I would have loved to have seen that show.
Me too. I think there's a lot there from where 1897, ends, Leviathan, Judah Zachary, and that whole thing. It's like there's a lot of interesting characteristics there. To me, I have a little wacky theory. I don't feel when say kill Judah Zachary that he's ever really gone. He just makes them think.
Remember.
What's that?
Not as long as we remember him.
That's right. I love that. Right. As long as we remember Judah Zachary, he's alive, right? But right in the heart. Yep. And I just think that Zachary's just somewhere out there. But sorry, I'm getting off topic. But
you're getting sentimental about Judah. That's nice.
I am. Listen, I love heels. Heels are what make shows, really. I mean, but they're fun. But
so do you think they would have brought on Judah Zachary in the modern era?
I think that here's what I think. I think because we only ever see one real follower of Judah Zachary, right?
Yeah.
One real cult member. I think there's way more than one cult member out there, and that the other cult members know how to get Judah Zachary back.
Yeah.
And they're just waiting to do it. Like they're not stupid. He has very smart members and very loyal members who won't betray him.
Yeah.
And I do think that they know his head is missing his face, but they know how to now fix him, because look, it's 2021.
Yeah.
We have lots of technology and lots of
Flair's still alive.
Yeah.
Bring him on. That would be great. I mean, I as we talked about, I have a lot of trepidation about the possibility of Dark Shadows, The Next Generation kind of, and part of that would be the desire to write in so much new stuff.
Right.
Because so many people are gone. To write in so much new stuff that, yeah, I guess it's kind of Dark Shadows for a year or two, but it's not connected necessarily to this whole continuum of history. And I desperately hope that his plan involves really rooting this so that Dark Shadows fans, when they tune in, don't even need the title of the show on there to go, oh yeah, that's Dark Shadows.
Right.
That's a continuation of all of these questions that I had.
It's sort of the emphasis, like, to me, I'm going to use a word comparison. When we watch, because we're fans of Season of the Witch, when we watch Season of the Witch, we know it's a Halloween movie.
Halloween 3, yeah.
We don't need to see Halloween 3 on the title. We know it's a Halloween movie. Same thing, this new Dark Shadows. Make sure you're leaving the seed blueprint. When I look at this is Dark Shadows.
Sure. And God knows, Mr. Perry is unbelievably devoted to Dark Shadows and affectionate towards Dark Shadows. And that buys him all of the credit that he needs with me.
Yep.
So I have very high hopes, but at the same time, I kind of sort of wish it were a remake, and I kind of then wish it were something completely different. the way Battlestar Galactica retold that story, but
Right.
went in a weird direction, which means I want to see Edward James Olmos as Elizabeth Collins' daughter, because they each have 3 names.
They do. They do. Do you think that we talked about the hand of Patofe? So, do you think maybe a collector of the occult could have the hand?
I think Collector of the Occult has the hand and maybe a lot of other parts of Count Patofi.
Yeah.
So just let your mind go with that, and that he's being reconstructed. But seriously, yeah, I think that hand is probably going to get chopped off again by someone, and that's a very easy, and then you have an ancestor or a descendant of Patofi coming after the hand or something like that, and you get a almost Evil Dead like scene where they have to chop off their own hand to put the original hand on, and what they do is they get the hand wrong, so they have like 2 right hands or what. It's this strange thing. No, not really, but they put it on their foot. Yeah, absolutely. I would be shocked if they didn't. And with the right casting, you can really nail it. And my evidence with that is Rainn Wilson as Harry Mudd, who I don't know if you've seen him as Harry Mudd on Star Trek Discovery. He's great. Best thing on the show. So sure, you could recapture. I guess Philip Seymour Hoffman's dead, isn't he?
Yes.
That's because he would have been a great Count Patofi. Wow.
I think you have said Alfred Molina before too. He could.
Oh, if I did, I was a genius. Good for me. Yeah, Alfred Molina would be terrific.
I believe you did when not the podcast we did with Butch, but we did one before that. And I do believe you had said Alfred Molina.
If I didn't, I wish I did. That's a fantastic choice.
You don't remember? I do.
I'm glad someone does. I got brain damage. I got severe narcolepsy. I got terrible sleep apnea. I'm killing brain cells every single night. It's a wonder I'm not talking about Strange Paradise.
On this episode of the podcast, no.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about how great Fish and Wojo were, and how I'm waiting for Ron Glass to come back to Collinwood. I'm completely lost because I'd make the Abe Vigoda connection between Dark Shadows and Barney Miller and become convinced they were the same show.
No, but you did really, and I do mean this. Patrick did say Alfred Molina, which I thought was a great suggestion.
It's marvelous. I can really admire my own genius because I wasn't there at the time. So it's like hearing a stranger say it. It's like, well, that's great. I wish I'd come up with that idea, and yet I did. And get Peter Dinklage for anything. Bring that guy in. He needs to be on Dark Shadows.
I tell you who, like, if they actually have somebody have the hand, like maybe a collector of the occult or something, and they maybe know quite what it is. They're not sure. They know it's something. But because I could see the hand of Patofe sort of being lost throughout time, I would not mind it maybe getting Tobin Bell to have that hand.
Tobin Bell be great.
Because I love his performance in the Saw movies.
Yeah.
I know he was in a ton of other things, but that's where I know him from.
Now, you know who you bring in is Judah Zachary, because Judah Zachary gets his head put on a new body and then gets the hand.
Yeah.
Put the missing body parts of Dark Shadows all on one person. Jeffrey Combs. Jeffrey Combs as Count Patofi or Judah Zachary or a little bit of both. Judah Patofi.
I like that.
Yeah.
Do you think that Quentin... I sort of gave this weird pitch about Quentin still being in Collinsport. and him living under the name of something Marcus Graham,
Okay.
and he's this photographer. No one knows it's him. He's older or whatever, and he's sort of watching the Collins family with it through his lens, and he sees something happen, and we don't know it's David Selby until he goes into his shop. He develops the picture that he saw something happen with. He looks at it, and then when he puts it down, we see in the reflection of the mirror, we see David Selby,
Uh-huh.
and he knows what he has to do, which is bring Barnabas back. And he takes down this portrait of a pirate ship. Behind that is a safe. He opens the safe, and there's the vial of blood. Mark B. Collins. He knows where Barnabas is buried under a different name that he knows. Because to me, if you bury Barnabas as Barnabas, you have a lot of explaining to do.
Sure.
And he goes and he just dumps the blood in the mouth and brings him back. Because to me, Quentin is the one person who could do it.
Okay. But because they don't have Jonathan Frid, and because you do have David Selby,
Yes.
you are playing in a universe where these characters are the same. They do have a physical sameness. So what if he gets it in the wrong mouth? What if something else is buried in that? And so you have this strange fusion of these two characters. You get someone else who's brought back to some dupe, who was buried in that place, and that way you explain why it's not Jonathan Frid.
I like that. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. That would make sense because that way it's a completely different body.
Mm-hmm.
It's a different height. It's not the same look. So maybe he gets it wrong. You know, there.
And that's a whole other mystery as to why is there this other body in the coffin that I buried Barnabas in under the wrong name.
Yes,
That's a whole other thing.
that could be. I like that.
Yeah, because you gotta bring back Barnabas. But if you do have Catherine Lee Scott running around, David Selby running around, and all these other people, since they look alike, people are going to expect Jonathan Frid.
Yes, they
And,
are.
and to exist in a universe where that Jonathan Frid portrait is a thing is one of the things that really makes it Dark Shadows.
Yeah. I think that's the thing too. Like, if because they are, no matter what, they're going to recast Barnabas. It's coming, and I accept that. But at the same time, if you can have an explanation of why this, change has occurred, then great.
Sure.
I'm all for it. That's something I can most certainly give because simply for the fact of being a fan of Dark Shadows, it's all about the supernatural and mistakes.
Sure.
You know,
Supernatural is constantly missed. Just because it's this all-powerful force doesn't mean the person aiming the gun is going to have the proper aim.
right, right.
Barnabas regretting not having better aim when he shot Angelique.
He's no Solomon Kane, that's for damn sure.
He's not.
He's really not. There's actually a line in a shadow called Double Z where the shadow says, "You are either a good shot or a bad shot. No one is both." And the shadow says it. It's true. You're with a gun. You're either a really good shot or you're really a bad shot.
There's a reason Angelique had to give him that charm for what when he went into the duel with Jeremiah, because this guy's a dead man.
She's like, well, you know what? I can't rely on this guy to shoot somebody.
Yeah, Barnabas is not he's not a gunfighter. Don't
No,
take it down, boy. Leave your guns at home, kid.
no, that's
The song Johnny Cash ever wrote was about Barnabas Collins. If you really strip it down,
I love it.
well, the song "Hurt"
Yeah.
You know, is that the Trent Reznor? Is it who wrote that? Is that Trent Reznor?
I'm not sure who did it originally. I've heard the Johnny Cash version though.
Yeah, yeah, boy, that's your Barnabas theme song.
Yep. It really is. I mean, he in every way he fits that song too. That's the irony of it. It's just so it's deep.
That I'll tell you, Julia giving him those injections, the old, the needle tears a hole, that old familiar sting.
Yep.
Yeah, but I remember everything. What
Yep.
about
I love that he says about I hurt myself today. I think about that when Barnabas rejects Angelique. Really, he's hurting himself in every way. It's weird, the analogy of it, really. But what did you think of, Chris? We know Chris being a descendant of Quentin. So we see Chris change into the werewolf first, obviously, in the present day. What did you think of Chris Jennings, the character?
I love Chris Jennings as a character. He is maybe the most human, real world character, particularly the Dark Shadows. Bad, actually pretty good W.C. Fields impressions and all. I think I immediately responded Don Briscoe as this just human, real world kind of normal guy who is neither of the aristocracy nor of he's not a fisherman either, and that he somehow has a shot with Carolyn, and he's not a very good brother, but he's trying.
Yeah.
And his despondency, I mean, it's all very Lon Chaney Jr. All these werewolves want to do is die.
Yeah.
And that he has such, he's not really necessarily looking for a cure. And he keeps telling Julia, you can lock me up in this thing, but it's only going to be good maybe for a night unless I get out. And it drives home in some ways better than Quentin did the sense of remorse of this entirely other person that you're bound to, which is kind of the Adam story. That your life is bound to this inherently destructive being. That's and one that you didn't really take on. And I kind of wonder sometimes if the ghost of Quentin's just listening as he's trying to poison him and do all these other things. And it's like, yeah, I know what it's like. And I'm sorry, Charles Delaware Tate's in another town making an android of himself, so he's not available to help you out. Joy, I just want to die. Okay.
I think the one role I would have loved to see Don Briscoe play would have been Dick Grayson, Nightwing.
Yeah.
I think that's a role he could have. I could have seen Don Briscoe in the DC universe or the Marvel universe.
More DC than Marvel.
Yeah.
He really has a DC quality.
Yeah. He just somebody that could have fit into that world so easily.
He would have been good as the Question.
Yes. 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 Yes, sir. By the way, for those who don't know what we're talking about, the Question wore a fedora hat, trench coat, and he was a conspiracy. Everything was a question. Mm-hmm. Everything was just everything. For people who don't know. But what did you think of, speaking of Charles Delaware Tate, the man who literally could bring his paintings to life?
Most powerful character in the Dark Shadows universe.
Yeah. He really is. He's really weird and interesting. And he serves Patofe, but he also at the same time, he's questioning Potofe's other underling. And it's just like, I, I always found myself not necessarily hating Charles Delaware Tate, but not loving him either. He was sort of a very gray character at times.
Doesn't he have a scene with Aristide towards the end when Aristide's trying to get him to do something and Tate just knows something awful's going to happen to Aristide. And he
Yes.
just puts him out into the night and says, yeah, sure, Aristide, I'm sure. Good luck with that. I think it's Aristide. Davis is terrific in that sequence. He is able to play it just believably enough that a dope like Aristide, a desperate dope like Aristide, is going to believe it.
Yep.
And just satirically enough that he doesn't care if Aristide starts catching on because Aristide has it coming.
Yeah. He comes in asking for his help because Aristide is being chased by
Garth Blackwood?
Yes, I'm sorry for forgetting. But he's like, oh, Davis is cold, but at the same time calm and relaxed. He's so the actors who were in Dark Shadows will never get enough credit for being so on.
Well, especially Roger Davis.
Yes.
Roger Davis, I think probably because he did have a reputation for being a practical joker on the set. And I think because some of the characters, not Davis, but the characters that he played were pretty shrill.
Yeah.
After Jeff Clark, Peter Bradford, he plays basically a sequence of assholes. He's, there's Ned Stewart's no prize. Yep. And Dirk Wilkins ends up being a dupe for Laura. It's like, oh, God, you couldn't at least be a henchman for somebody cooler? Mm-hmm. Okay. And so Charles Delaware Tate is actually the most respectable Roger Davis character that he played after Peter Bradford. I have a lot of love for Roger Davis. I just think he is a very underrated performer on that show.
Yes. I always think about each actor and where I would have liked to see them outside of Dark Shadows. I would have loved to see Roger Davis just be in a different television series, but play maybe like a completely different character based upon him or based upon a character that someone wrote for him. Again, there's maybe something like a Mission Impossible or something that he could have did.
Yeah, the thing about a guy like Roger Davis or David Selby is that the era of television that would have allowed them to do the most really only came as they were nearing retirement or semi-retirement from show business. Because I would love to see somebody like Roger Davis in something like The Wire.
Yep.
It's just an incredibly bright man and really funny.
Yep.
That's one of the hidden things about Dark Shadows that, everybody knows that Christopher Pennock's funny, but Roger Davis is really funny. Catherine Lee Scott is really funny. She is one of the wittiest people I know. It's such a dry wit. Okay, Catherine Lee Scott, sorry, real fast. I once asked her, I was watching this documentary about John Milius, who's the guy who directed Conan the Barbarian, and used to walk around with the Barbarian sword around Hollywood. He was a nut. And I asked her, I said, who would have won in a fight, John Milius or Dan Curtis? And her answer was the lawyers. Very, very funny woman.
I love that. That was good. The lawyers.
And without missing a beat. Without missing. I mean, Catherine Lee Scott. It's too bad that there's not more funny writing being done. You
Right.
know, that it's basically David Sedaris and that's about it. Because uh, she is, in my opinion, one of the wittiest, funniest people I've met. I mean, just flat out hilarious.
I don't I don't understand why. Maybe I know they want to probably retire, and I respect that. I do, Patrick. But I don't get why maybe we don't, instead of having to do maybe stepping in front of the camera, because I could understand that too. Maybe do more voice acting and go on like a Family Guy or a cartoon or something.
Hollywood's ageist, and it doesn't take Dark Shadows seriously because it was a daytime show,
Right.
and to get into it takes, what, 400 and something hours
Yeah.
of life. The production values were standard for a soap of that time. However, they were not Hollywood production values. And so to look at it, it's very easy to write it off with bad special effects. And they're not bad, they're just what they could afford. And the stigma of the soap opera. And so I think that although it propelled these people to stardom, it was an albatross around a lot of their necks because, oh, you're a soap opera actor. I mean, Lisa Rinna, I'm crazy about, but yeah, he's not a lot for her.
Yeah.
Um, the woman who plays Sammy on Days of Our Lives,
Yeah.
I love that actress. Gosh, she's terrific. And some of the best acting that you're going to see, and if you ask acting teachers this in Los Angeles, they'll back me up, is on soap operas.
Yeah.
But they don't always get the credit that they deserve for it. One of the funniest actors in TV is on, I think, Bold and the Beautiful. It's a guy named Dick Christie. And I forget the name of the character he plays. Dick Christie's magnificent. He's a really, really, really bright, interesting, funny actor. Thank God that John Delancey managed to get that Next Generation audition because he was a Days of Our Lives actor, I think.
So soap actors are basically passed over, not taken seriously because they're on daytime TV, and it's just like, why can't you just look at them and take a closer look at what they're doing?
I don't know, and some soap opera actors do make the leap. I mean, Mia Farrow,
Right.
but it doesn't happen as often as I would like, and also, I mean, Hollywood is just a big messy town with a lot of competition.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. In 1897, we do get Angelique. She's summoned from hell.
It's in some ways Angelique's story. She has a tremendous arc.
Yep.
In this story. We see her really at almost her most emotionally mature, but it's as a process of her being there.
Yeah.
Angelique becomes, a full-fledged hero, fighting Laura and fighting Petofi, curing Barnabas,
Yep.
working with Julia Hoffman, having that great bit of dialogue that they share in that one episode, where they just get to be for a moment.
Yep.
And it makes me wish the entire episode had just been the two of them talking about, how weird it's been to have this thing for Barnabas. And now it hasn't paid off, but man, they're still there. They're still curing him.
Julia, you could tell, is in love with Barnabas. Angelique's in love with Barnabas. And no, neither of that has gone anywhere.
Hasn't paid off because Barnabas is in love with someone he's not in love with. That, who, as it turns out, I think he's in love with the idea of Josette. But let's face it, it doesn't take long for him to go, even though this one woman I kidnapped and tried to brainwash looked just like Josette, that's going to be Vicky.
It's like, uh, Jonathan, Fred, I love you, man. Barnabas, I love you, but dude, Vicky is not Josette, man.
She's not just that, and it's she is the rebound,
She is,
but
and it's like
and
it's
not relative. So
this is a vampire who's literally desperate.
and desperation, as Seth MacFarlane says, is a stinky perfume. And that's why we can identify. That's certainly why I identify with him. I get it. I totally get it.
Right. It's like he just wants what he thinks he wants, or who he thinks he wants, and it's amazing.
He just wants a girlfriend. Somebody be his girlfriend. Get someone. It does. It really, at this point, it doesn't matter. Megan Todd. You know, Philip. Philip is. I think she could land Barnabas if she wanted to.
Yes, yes, absolutely. The perfect song for Barnabas is Queen's "Find Me Someone to Love."
Sure.
It really is.
That or the theme to Flash Gordon.
Yes, 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 sir. There's with 1897, Barnabas, when he finally accomplishes his mission, we'll say, he runs into the Leviathan.
Yeah. That's what I'm writing about in the new day book,
Yeah,
actually.
we won't. So we won't touch on that here because I don't want to spoil whatever Patrick might have.
Okay. So, I mean, hopefully that will be out before this or at the same time. It's just kind of waiting.
I know. I don't. I don't want to give away anything. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
In your new book, but
Oh, no, this is in the new column.
oh, okay, okay, okay. The new
Yeah.
column. The new column.
Yeah.
Okay, so we could talk
Column.
about we could talk about this one then.
Yeah.
Okay, okay. I'm sorry, my mistake. Uh, okay, so the Leviathan.
Spoiler. I mean, the show's been out for 50 years, so it's okay. It's all right.
The host is not crazy at all. Now, what did you think of the Leviathan, Patrick?
Of that storyline?
Yes, yes, sir.
Okay. No, I mean, it's my job to like all of Dark Shadows, and I do, but it did not go as many places as I would have liked. I think that it exists from a meta story point of view to undermine Barnabas again so that he can rise once more. I mean, why do we fall? Well, we fall, Master Wayne, so that we can get back up.
Right.
And Barnabas is at his apex in 1897.
Yeah.
And yet he gets knocked down again and has to rise once more with maybe a new understanding of things like morality and forgiveness, and so do the other characters around him. We see that when Barnabas goes back to 1796 in that very brief flashback between 1897 and the Leviathans, where he encounters Angelique. And he says, Angelique, please do this. And she says, why? What will you give me? And he says, my gratitude. And that's a perfectly decent answer. That's an honorable answer. And in that case, it's Angelique who fails the
Sorry.
because Angelique will later pass that test in 1840.
Right.
Basically says, okay, your gratitude's good enough. You're cured.
Yeah.
But as far as the Leviathan storyline goes, everyone's kind of grouchy. You can't trust most of the characters. And it doesn't end so much as it just kind of stops. This was a storyline that was too big for Dark Shadows, in that it's this big sort of supernatural Bond villain type organization that I don't think they could really rise to. However, it gave us Jeb Hawks. and it gave Christopher Pennock. And for that, I'm always grateful.
I think it's a hell of a concept. Here's these
conceptual. Yes.
It's. I mean, to me, before Judah Zachary, to me, the Leviathan are perhaps Dark Shadow's boldest concept in every way, in my opinion. I want to stress that so people will think of, but because here's these people who are serpents from the ground, and I get it. And I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Mandy with Nicolas Cage.
I have.
The characters who kill his wife remind me of the Leviathan people in every way. So when I see Mandy and I look at the Leviathans, I'm thinking this is pretty much similar in a way.
Yeah.
Where I could see the Leviathans doing this. I think where I would have loved to sort of maybe see them do is have either where they had the makeup where they made them look like the colorization, have them look a little more human, where you don't know who the Leviathan are. They have undercover like agents.
Yeah.
And they're sort of watching Barnabas without him realizing it and watching other people. Because to me, if you're really a snake at heart, a snake never trusts people who aren't one of their own. And I do think they could have pulled that off and maybe had them turn into serpents at some point where they're crawling around on the ground. Again, it's a bold concept. I love it, the concept of it. Mm-hmm. I just think I do agree with you from a Dark Shadow standpoint. It's huge. It
is, and I really wish that they had tied it into more of the past mythology of the Collinses. For instance, Barnabas sees the Leviathan tattoo.
Right.
And he says, that's interesting. So you say that's a Leviathan tattoo. Yeah, that's a Leviathan tattoo. Okay, because when I saw it on Joshua's wrist when I was a kid, he told me it was just something that he had gotten while in the South Seas.
Right.
So telling me that my father was a Leviathan.
Right.
Which suddenly the whole show blossoms.
Right.
So just thought, Jewel, we started late because of all sorts of weird power issues.
I'm sorry.
And I have a show to direct.
I am so sorry, bud.
No, don't apologize at all. I'm apologizing because I am out of Dark Shadow's juice.
Okay. So before I let you go, I want to give a huge thank you to Patrick for being patient with me.
Oh, yeah.
It is always a pleasure to have you on, my friend. You are just a pure joy.
And I have a big Leviathan master conspiracy theory chart that if we want to do Leviathans, let's do Leviathans and let's make it about that. It ties everything together.
Next time Patrick comes on, we are going to do the Leviathans.
Let's do it.
1,000%.
Let's do it.
Patrick, man, thank you so much, my friend. It is always a pleasure. You have a great night and best wishes with the directing.
Thank you very much. Take care.
Welcome, you too. Bye.
Bye.